The evening of June 29, 1994. Kensington Gardens, London. A car pulls up outside the Serpentine Gallery, and Diana, Princess of Wales, steps into a wall of flashbulbs. She is wearing a black off-the-shoulder cocktail dress, short, fitted, purchased from designer Christina Stambolian 3 years earlier, and kept in her wardrobe ever since, because she had originally decided it was too bold. Around her neck, 7 strands of pearls, fastened at the center by an oval sapphire the size of a large coin, surrounded by 2 rows of diamonds. Pearl drop earrings from Collingwood. No other jewelry. She is attending a Vanity Fair gala fundraising dinner. She accepted the invitation 2 days before. 2 days before, news had circulated that Charles, Prince of Wales, would be speaking on camera to the journalist Jonathan Dimbleby that night. At 9 o'clock, Charles confirms on air that his marriage has irretrievably broken down, and that he has, yes, been unfaithful. The admission goes out across Britain, while Diana, in Kensington Gardens, works a room full of cameras and guests. The photographs from the Serpentine Gallery and the transcript of Charles's interview compete for the same front pages the following morning. The competition isn't close. 15 years later, the newspapers still call the dress the revenge dress. Diana never used the term. What she left instead was the image. A woman who had somewhere to be, wearing a piece of jewelry with a 13-year history that made the night's visual logic complete. To understand why it was there and what it meant, you have to go back to before the marriage, back to when Diana wore whatever the institution gave her, and wore it where the institution pointed her. The British royal family has never been casual about jewelry. For centuries, the pieces worn by royals at public events communicated things the institution didn't need to say aloud. Diplomatic alignment, hierarchy within the family, the current configuration of favor and standing. Scholars who have studied Elizabeth I's portraits note that her jewel choices were as carefully calculated as any policy document. Pearls, rubies, and diamonds positioned for what they declared rather than what they cost. By the time the House of Windsor inherited this tradition, it was old, elaborate, and fully codified. The legal framework matters here. Pieces in the royal collection are held in trust for the nation, not personally owned even by the sovereign. A lifetime loan isn't a gift. It's an arrangement that expires at the recipient's death and reverts to the collection. Queen Elizabeth II owned personally more than 300 items of jewelry. What she loaned to members of the family, tiaras for state occasions, necklaces for banquets, brooches for formal visits, remained, in the legal sense, hers. The recipient wore it. The institution kept title. This is the system Diana entered on July 29, 1981. A system designed to dress its members in its own meaning. And it's the system she spent 15 years learning to work against, one piece at a time. She arrived in it with almost nothing. Born Lady Diana Spencer, daughter of the 8th Earl Spencer, she had a 3-strand pearl choker with a turquoise and pearl cluster clasp, given by her parents for her 18th birthday, matching ones having been given to both her older sisters on their own 18th birthdays. A gold initial necklace she had worn as a nursery school assistant while still dating Charles, some enameled bangles, and a wardrobe her future style advisor Anna Harvey described as a few Laura Ashley blouses and skirts and some bobbly jumpers. That was it. Harvey was British Vogue's fashion editor, brought in to help almost immediately after the February 1981 engagement announcement. She recalled calling in far too many clothes for their first meeting because she had absolutely no idea of the kind of things she liked. Her initial assessment? Diana had been dressed throughout her teenage years largely by her mother, Frances Shand Kidd, who favored garden party hats from milliner John Boyd and blousy floral dresses. Before the engagement, whenever Diana had tried to choose her own looks without help, it tended to backfire. most publicly when she arrived at a BBC interview to coincide with the engagement announcement, wearing a Kohana London suit and pussy bow blouse she had picked off the rack at Harrods with Francis. The suit made her look, as Tina Brown later put it, like a Sloane on the frontispiece of country life. Even the most sympathetic media outlets admitted it made her look matronly and old-fashioned. Harvey went to Kensington Palace for their subsequent sessions, arriving with a rail of clothes. They would sit on the floor of Diana's drawing room, going through sketches and swatches of fabric, while the butler brought endless coffee. Diana's eyes lit up when she saw the options. Harvey recalled thinking she had no idea how many lovely things there were out there. Diana proved very open to ideas. She also proved quickly that she had opinions of her own that couldn't always be displaced. Harvey tried consistently to move Diana away from heavy jewelry. "I couldn't get her out of big jewelry," Harvey wrote in her 1997 tribute, published in Vogue. "She loved fooling people with fakes." Harvey once gave her a pair of beautiful, delicate Angela Hale earrings for her birthday. She never saw Diana wearing them. The royal family's protocol called for gloves at almost every public event. Harvey ordered dozens of suede gloves for Diana in every shade. "Heaven knows where they all went," she wrote, "because she never wore any of them. She wanted flesh-to-flesh contact." Diana's bare hands became a recurring image across her public life. Pressing palms with patients in hospices, crouching to meet children at eye level, holding the hands of landmine victims. They became part of what distinguished her from every other working royal of her generation. The gloves Harvey ordered by the dozen went into a wardrobe drawer and stayed there. The friction between the institutional grooming and the person inside it was audible from the first sessions, and it was expressed consistently through the same category of object: what went on her body versus what the institution expected her to put there. Not confrontational, not visible to the press, but persistent enough that Harvey, across 17 years of working with her, logged it as a fixed feature of the relationship. In March 1981, 2 months before the July wedding, Diana appeared in public with her fiancé for the first time. The occasion was a musical recital at Goldsmiths Hall in the City of London. She was meant to wear something appropriate, something that communicated the demure seriousness the press had been attributing to her since the engagement announcement. The gentle and shy girl from the New York Times, the one who avoids nightclubs and stylish parties and blushes engagingly. She visited the Emmanuel's studio in Mayfair to collect what had been prepared, arrived to find their workroom full of fittings and rails, and spotted a strapless ruffled gown with a plunging heart-shaped bodice that an actress had previously worn to a charity event. She asked to try it on. "It felt so different to anything she'd worn before," Elizabeth Emanuel recalled. "She looked so grown up, like a movie star, and she loved the idea of breaking the mold." Black was associated with mourning in royal protocol. The neckline was, by any standard of the time, aggressive for a prince's fiancé on their first official appearance together. A BBC journalist covering the evening reported audible, admiring gasps from the room. The New York Times wrote that Prince Charles, all but forgotten for the moment, seemed amused by the interest in his fiancée's attire. He reportedly turned back to the press pack and called, "Have all the fashion writers finished?" They had not finished. The press described her décolletage with something close to delight and a great deal of column inches. Fashion journalists raised technical objections. "Nobody wears a strapless dress to an occasion on which she will be seated most of the time," wrote one. "Why? Because you look as though you were sitting in a hip bath, silly." Princess Grace of Monaco was in attendance that night. When Diana confided her anxieties about the future, Grace told her simply, "Don't worry, it will get a lot worse." Within a month of that evening, Diana returned the Emmanuel's black gown to their Brook Street studio. She needed it altered, she explained. Her frame had changed. She intended to wear it again. "I was quite big-chested then," Diana later told Andrew Morton, "and they all got frightfully excited. Then, black to me was the smartest color you could possibly have at the age of 19. It was a real grown-up dress." The pattern was visible from the first event she ever attended as a royal fiancé. A borrowed dress from the rail, a neckline she'd decided on her own was appropriate, a room full of press photographs, and a prince temporarily erased from the coverage. The engagement itself had introduced the first object that said something about Diana specifically, rather than about the role she was entering. In February 1981, Diana selected her engagement ring from a Garrard retail catalog. Not a bespoke commission, not a repurposed royal heirloom, a ring available for purchase by any member of the public. A 12-carat oval salon sapphire surrounded by 14 solitaire diamonds, set in 18-carat white gold, priced at approximately £28,000. Royal brides were expected to receive something unique, custom-made, exclusively theirs, a piece that couldn't be duplicated or purchased from a shelf. Diana chose the biggest sapphire in the catalog. Sources across multiple decades described the choice as having shattered royal tradition, irked the British monarchy, and caused backlash for breaking a long-standing royal tradition. One source familiar with palace circles noted, "At the time, this ring was seen as a significant departure from tradition. Royal brides were expected to wear something unique, commissioned, and entirely exclusive." Diana choosing a ring that anyone could theoretically buy was viewed by some as almost unthinkable. Whether the palace was explicit in voicing these concerns at the moment of the 1981 announcement, or whether this framing calcified retrospectively in press coverage, is genuinely hard to establish from the available record. The contemporaneous documentation is thin, but the ring itself communicated something without ambiguity. Diana had made her first significant public jewelry decision according to her own preference rather than institutional protocol. She reached past the bespoke tradition and picked what she wanted from a shelf. The ring spent the next 11 years communicating very little beyond marital membership. Then, it began to say something else. The wedding, July 29, 1981, at St. Paul's Cathedral. Diana wore her mother's diamond earrings, borrowed for the ceremony, a central pear-shaped diamond surrounded by approximately 50 smaller stones. She also wore the Spencer family tiara. The Queen had offered the Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara for the occasion, loaned to Diana as a wedding gift. Diana declined it in favor of the Spencer piece. The Spencer tiara was a family construction, assembled across generations. Its oldest elements came from a tiara that had belonged to Frances Manby, the last Viscountess Montague, and been bequeathed to Lady Sarah Spencer in 1875. The center element was a wedding gift from Lady Sarah Isabella Spencer to Lady Cynthia Hamilton, Diana's paternal grandmother, when she married Albert, Viscount Althorp, the future 7th Earl Spencer, in 1919. Garrard was then commissioned in 1937 to create 4 matching sections to complete the whole into its current form. Both of Diana's older sisters, Jane and Sarah, had worn it at their own weddings. It was a Spencer tradition on the occasion of marrying into something else. Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, later reported that the tiara gave her a cracking headache because she wasn't accustomed to wearing one for that length of time. She wore it anyway. The point is worth holding for a moment. On the most watched day of her life, given access to one of the most famous tiaras in the royal collection, Diana chose a Spencer headache over a royal loan. The same day, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, gave Diana a large oval sapphire and diamond brooch as a wedding gift. One source described it as duck egg-sized, an oval sapphire surrounded by a double row of diamonds, heavy and formal, the kind of piece you pin to a lapel at a state occasion. A welcome into the family from the Queen Mother herself, framed in sapphires. You are one of us now." In the years that followed, the institution dressed Diana with its borrowed collection. The Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara appeared at most formal state events. 19 oriental pearls, each hanging from a diamond-centered lover's knot bow. The piece Queen Mary had commissioned from Gerard in 1913. Diana reportedly complained about the swinging pearls and found it uncomfortable, but wore it through most of her major tiara occasions across the decade. It appeared most memorably at a 1989 visit to Hong Kong, paired with an embroidered white gown the press nicknamed her Elvis dress. The Lover's Knot tiara was doing exactly what it was designed to do, linking this woman to Queen Mary, to the continuous line of women who had worn it before her, to the institution's long memory. The Art Deco emerald and diamond choker, created by Gerard in 1921 for Queen Mary, using emeralds presented to the Queen by the Ladies of India in 1911, was loaned to Diana by the Queen as a wedding gift on a lifetime basis. The 4-row Japanese pearl choker appeared around Diana's neck at the November 1982 state visit to the Netherlands. For the 1983 Australia tour, the Queen loaned a diamond necklace. The Greville pear-drop earrings came from the royal collection for a state banquet on the same tour, paired with the Spencer tiara. At formal occasions, Diana normally wore jewelry lent by the Queen, whose personal collection ran to more than 300 items. The system worked as designed. Diana arrived at events in the collection's pieces. The pieces announced the institution's continuity. The institution's continuity required Diana to keep appearing in them. The borrowed pieces said she belonged there. They weren't wrong, technically, but they weren't her language either. In November 1986, during a tour of the Middle East, the Sultan of Oman presented Diana with a suite of diamond and sapphire jewels, an addition from entirely outside the royal family's system. She wore elements of it at subsequent public appearances. The collection kept growing with pieces that had different origins and different claims on her than the palace loans. Foreign diplomatic gifts, pieces she commissioned or purchased privately from Collingwood and other preferred jewelers. The royal collection loans provided the institutional frame. What she placed inside that frame was increasingly her own. The most sharply documented early act of Diana wearing a royal loan against its intended use came on April 29, 1985. She was 24 years old at a state dinner in Melbourne during the Australia tour. She wore the Art Deco emerald and diamond choker, the Queen Mary piece on lifetime loan, across her forehead, horizontally, as a bandeau rather than around her neck as a choker. She had not physically altered it. The same emeralds, the same diamonds, the same Gerard construction, positioned 90 degrees from its intended orientation and fastened at a different point on her body altogether. The piece had been made for a throat. She put it on her head. No official palace statement confirmed any institutional reaction to this choice. No named aid communication has been documented. What circulated, and stuck, and was repeated across decades of coverage, was that the Queen was reported to have been displeased by this unorthodox use of a historic jewel. Unverified as a direct quote, or a confirmed private communication, but persistent enough as a report to constitute its own kind of evidence. The story the institution preferred not to confirm, and has never been able to fully dismiss. What is documented without ambiguity is the image itself, reproduced in newspapers at the time and in royal-style retrospectives ever since. A 24-year-old at an official state event, wearing a piece the institution had loaned to her for a specific purpose, using it for a purpose the institution had not anticipated. Diana continued wearing the emerald choker well into her post-separation years. It returned to the royal collection only after her death. Catherine, Princess of Wales, now wears it. The same year, Charles gave Diana a grey pearl necklace by London jeweler Leo de Vroomen. She wore it twice, in Austria in April 1986 and at a school visit in Japan the following month. Researchers who have tracked her jewelry history Note the necklace was given during a period when the marriage was deteriorating, and that Diana reportedly found little pleasure in it. The contrast to the Queen Mother's converted brooch is stark. What came as a gift from the head of the family on her wedding day, she transformed at her own expense and wore for 15 years. What came from Charles during the marriage's difficult period, she wore twice and set aside. The conversion of the Queen Mother's sapphire brooch is the central object in this story. At some point in the early 1980s, the documentary record hasn't yielded an exact date. Diana had the oval sapphire and diamond brooch modified. A jeweler converted it from a brooch into the centerpiece clasp of a 7-strand pearl choker. The oval sapphire, surrounded by its 2 rows of diamonds, now fastened 7 strands of pearls around Diana's throat instead of being pinned to a lapel. The physical transformation was small in scale and radical in consequence. The difference between a brooch and a choker isn't merely aesthetic. A brooch is hierarchical and institutional. It's pinned to the chest, below the face, at the level of rank and decoration. A choker sits at the base of the throat, frames the jaw, draws the eye upward toward the face. It reads differently in photographs. In photographs taken from across a room or across a street, which is what press photographs overwhelmingly are, a brooch disappears into a field of fabric. A 7-strand pearl choker with a sapphire clasp at the throat is impossible to miss. The conversion made the piece legible from 40 meters without changing a single stone. The piece appeared at a Downing Street dinner in February 1982, documented in its new form. It also appeared as a brooch at the Netherlands state visit in November 1982, which means the piece existed in both configurations at different points. The exact conversion date remains unconfirmed. Which jeweler performed the work is undocumented. Whether the modification had any institutional sanction or was entirely Diana's private undertaking, the paperwork hasn't surfaced. One account notes that Diana paid for the modification from her own funds, which is possibly why the converted piece was later classified as her private property, rather than a crown loan when the estate was being settled after her death. Harvey documented the shift in Diana's overall aesthetic in her 1997 tribute. The turning point, style-wise, in her marriage came on the second tour to Australia, when she began playing with glamour and becoming much more daring. The establishment response, Harvey recalled, was hostility. They didn't think it was royal. Diana had chosen a beaded, one-shouldered hachi dress that Harvey had been uncertain about. She had slipped it onto the rail, half hoping Diana would pass over it. Diana made a beeline for it. When the press photographs came back, Harvey wrote that she realized Diana's instincts had been right. Harvey's single most useful observation about the whole arc of Diana's style life covers both the clothing and the jewelry without distinguishing them. As she became more independent, the heels got higher, the skirts shorter. It was almost a semaphore of clothes to signal her state of mind, as she well knew. The semaphore extended to what she wore at her throat and on her hands. During the 1980s, Diana used inherited money from a family friend to buy a 2-row Italian pearl necklace with gold spacer bars from Collingwood, one of her preferred personal jewelers. Collingwood had given her a pair of pearl drop earrings before the marriage, pieces that predated her royal identity and belonged to her independently of anything the palace had arranged. The Collingwood pieces grew into a consistent signature through the late 1980s and early 1990s. Multi-strand pearl chokers and earrings, photographable from a distance, requiring no caption to identify. By the early 1990s, press coverage was noting that Diana's preference for chokers had created a fashion trend. Women across Britain and abroad were wearing multi-strand pearl chokers because Diana wore them. The institution had wanted her to wear its pieces to signal belonging. Instead, her personal pieces had become the style signal that millions were following. She also continued accumulating pieces from entirely outside the royal system. The Sultan of Oman's diamond and sapphire suite, various gifts from foreign dignitaries on state tours, pieces she chose and paid for herself. The Royal Collection loans provided the institutional frame. What she put in the center of that frame was increasingly her own. The separation was announced on December 9, 1992. Diana kept wearing the sapphire engagement ring. She kept wearing the wedding band. For 4 years, through the most exhaustively covered marital breakdown in the history of the British monarchy, both rings stayed on her finger. After the decree nisi was issued, she appeared at Eton College wearing both rings. Reports at the time and later attributed her continued ring-wearing partly to the desire to maintain a coherent image for her sons, to appear in photographs taken outside William's school as a woman who was still the recognizable wife and mother, rather than a woman visibly in the process of separating from the institution. Whether that was the full calculation on any given day isn't documented with the specificity that would make it a settled fact. What is documented is 4 years of continued post-separation ring-wearing and the visual it produced. The jewelry of the royal marriage, displayed during its public collapse, in front of cameras Diana knew were there. Then the divorce was finalized in August 1996, and the calculation changed. She moved an aquamarine ring onto her ring finger. The piece was a 25-carat emerald-cut aquamarine set in 24-carat yellow gold, a gift from Lucia Flecha de Lima, wife of the Brazilian ambassador, a figure from Diana's private social life, rather than from any institutional relationship. Considerably larger than the sapphire in terms of visual mass, entirely different in character. No royal precedent, no institutional associations, no particular history with the Windsor family. Worn specifically on the finger where the Gerard sapphire had spent 15 years. The sapphire retired from that position. Something else went on her hand in its place, and it was a gift from a friend rather than the symbol of a marriage. She wore the aquamarine to the Christie's auction preview in New York in June 1997. The press photographed it there, on her hand, on the finger where the engagement ring used to be. Christie's held the auction on June 25, 1997 in New York. The catalog title was specific. Dresses from the collection of Diana, Princess of Wales. 79 cocktail and evening gowns, not jewelry. Vanity Fair's July 1997 issue described the sale as Diana's decision to auction 79 of the dresses she wore as the wife of England's future king, being a powerful symbol of her changing life. The midnight blue Edelstein, the White House dress, worn in November 1985 with the sapphire choker at her throat while she danced with John Travolta, sold at a price that broke Christie's records for a single garment at that time. All proceeds went to cancer and AIDS charities. The distinction between what was sold and what was kept is worth holding clearly. Diana cleared the official wardrobe, the gowns of the wife of the future king. She kept everything that told the more complicated story. The converted choker, the Collingwood earrings, the aquamarine now on her ring finger, the Swan Lake commission still being finished at Gerard. None of it was offered. She stood at the Christie's auction preview in the aquamarine, surrounded by the dresses she was selling, wearing the ring that had replaced the engagement ring on her hand. The press photographed her there, wearing what she had decided to keep. Harvey wrote that, after the divorce, she was much freer. The clothes shifted. More Versace, streamlined columns and shift dresses, navy and pastels, a sleeker silhouette that suited what Harvey described as her role as a committed charity worker. The official wardrobe of state obligations was gone. What remained was Diana choosing what to wear to events she had chosen to attend, in pieces that were hers. Back to June 29, 1994, and the Serpentine Gallery, with the choker's full history now in view. Diana had initially declined the Vanity Fair gala invitation. She accepted 2 days before the event, Once news of Charles's Dimbleby interview had become public knowledge. She had owned the Stambolian dress for 3 years without wearing it outside Kensington Palace, having set it aside as too bold, originally planning that evening to wear Valentino. She changed her mind. The dress, black, off the shoulder, short, by Christina Stambolian. The choker, the 7-strand pearl and sapphire piece, the converted Queen Mother brooch, the White House and Royal Albert Hall piece, the piece she had worn at every major milestone since 1985. At her ears, Collingwood pearl drops. The two pieces together, the institutional piece transformed, the personal piece from her own jeweler, worn with a dress she had been saving for the right moment for 3 years. The photographs from that evening show a woman arriving at a party rather than managing a crisis. The sapphire choker at her throat catches in the flashbulbs. It was designed, in its converted form, to catch in flashbulbs from 40 meters. The Collingwood drops repeat the pearl and sparkle note at her ears. The dress is doing what the Emmanuel's black gown had done 13 years earlier at Goldsmiths Hall, overwhelming the room with the fact of her presence. Meanwhile, in living rooms across Britain, Charles was telling Jonathan Dimbleby that his marriage had irretrievably broken down. The "revenge dress" label was applied after the fact by press and public. Diana didn't describe the night that way in any documented statement. What can be established from the confirmed record is the timing. The Dimbleby interview and the Serpentine Gallery on the same evening, verified across multiple sources, and the specific visual choices. A dress she had owned and declined for 3 years, worn on this particular night. A choker with a 13-year history, converted from a royal wedding gift at Diana's own expense, worn at this event at her own discretion. What the institution gave Diana in 1981 as a mark of her absorption into the family, a brooch from the Queen Mother, sapphire and diamonds, a formal welcome. Diana had converted, privately funded, worn on her own schedule at her own events, and brought to a party in Kensington Gardens on the night her husband confessed to adultery on national television. The press read it as a unified statement. They were probably not wrong, even if the vocabulary was the press's rather than Diana's. The public received a very clear signal. Here was a woman who wasn't unraveling, who had somewhere to be, and who had chosen what to wear when she got there. After the Serpentine Gallery, the pattern continued. The sapphire choker was documented in Venice in 1995. In November 1995, Diana gave the Panorama interview to Martin Bashir. A dark suit, minimal jewelry, a presentation aimed at credibility and gravity rather than declaration. The choice communicated something specific. The pearl choker, worn with a Vanity Fair black dress, reads as presence and composure. Worn in a BBC studio for a serious interview about the state of the monarchy, it would have read as performance. She wore different signals in different rooms, calibrated to what each context required. The choker appeared at the Met Gala in New York in December 1996. That December night was the last publicly documented wearing of the piece during Diana's lifetime, across 15 years, from a White House dance floor to a New York fundraiser. The 7-strand pearl and sapphire choker had traced the arc of her public life as precisely as any calendar. On June 3, 1997, Diana wore a necklace to a performance of Swan Lake by the English National Ballet at the Royal Albert Hall. The piece was new, a commission she had developed directly with Gerard, the royal jewelers. The necklace comprised 178 diamonds and 7 South Sea pearls, set in platinum, to be accompanied by matching earrings still being completed. The design had been a collaboration, Diana working with Gerard to shape something she wanted, rather than selecting from existing stock or accepting what the institution offered. After the performance, she returned the necklace and the unfinished earrings to Gerard. The earrings needed to be finished. She would collect them when the work was done. She died on August 31st, 1997, in Paris. The earrings were still at Gerard. She had worn the necklace once. The Swan Lake suite, as it came to be called, was eventually sold at auction after her death. Among all the objects her life produced, it's the one that most literally constitutes an unfinished sentence. A commission she designed, a piece she wore once, a set she never received back. The earrings were incomplete when she died. The necklace went to auction without them. Diana's will left her personal estate approximately £21 million after taxes, primarily to William and Harry. A letter of wishes written the day after she signed the will specified that her jewelry and 3/4 of her personal property should pass to her sons, with 1/4 to be divided among her 17 godchildren. Her mother, Frances Shand Kidd, and sister Lady Sarah McCorquodale, acting as executors, subsequently obtained a court variation order distributing the estate differently from Diana's instructions. Each godchild received a single memento chosen by the executors, rather than a proportional share, and the parents of the godchildren weren't notified before this change was made. The specific allocation of named jewelry pieces between William and Harry isn't settled in the public record. The most frequently repeated version has Harry inheriting the sapphire engagement ring and giving it to William for the proposal to Catherine Middleton. Harry's memoir indicates the story isn't quite accurate, and Diana's former butler disputes Harry's version. The one detail confirmed without dispute: William proposed to Catherine in Kenya in November 2010, using Diana's ring. Obviously, she's not going to be around to share in all the fun and excitement, William told ITV after the announcement. So this is my way of keeping her close to it all. Catherine has worn the ring continuously since the engagement announcement. Over the years, she has added to it a Welsh gold wedding ring, an Anushka Eternity diamond ring given by William after Prince George's birth in 2013, a Pave diamond band, and what appears to be an Étincelle de Cartier ring added in 2024, reportedly following the end of her preventative chemotherapy. The 12-carat Gerard sapphire sits at the center of this accumulation, with everything Catherine has built around it layered alongside. Gerard's 1735 ring, designed from the same template as Diana's 1981 original, is currently one of the brand's best-selling pieces, worn by women globally who want the ring they see on the Princess of Wales's hand, which is the ring Diana chose from a public catalog, because it was the biggest sapphire available. A ring that reportedly irked the establishment in 1981 for its refusal to be bespoke, is now the global benchmark for high society engagement rings. The aquamarine, Diana's post-divorce ring, the 25-carat piece she wore on her ring finger from August 1996 onward, appeared on Meghan Markle's hand at Harry and Meghan's wedding reception on May 19, 2018. Harry had brought it from the private estate. 2 outer diamonds from Diana's personal jewelry collection were incorporated into Meghan's engagement ring. Diana's diamond tennis bracelet and butterfly earrings have appeared on Meghan at various subsequent public appearances, each generating its own press cycle. Here is the piece. Here is its history. Here is Diana's story. Here is where the object is now. Each appearance of a Diana piece generates coverage that the palace didn't commission and can't retract. The objects carry their own documentation: 15 years of dated appearances, named events, published photographs, and every time one surfaces, the story tells itself. The sapphire and pearl choker hasn't been publicly worn since the December 1996 Met Gala. Catherine hasn't worn it. No statement has addressed its status. It belongs to William and Harry. It has been neither exhibited nor worn publicly in the decades since Diana's death. The consistent observation among those who track royal jewelry closely is that the piece sits at the precise center of the narrative about Diana's image reclamation during the marriage's collapse. the piece that carries the most explicit charge from that period, and that its weight makes it something the next generation has apparently not chosen to take on. The choker that went to a Vanity Fair gala in 1994 and a Met Gala in 1996 has been silent ever since. The silence around it's itself a kind of information. It's the piece that says the most by staying unworn. Anna Harvey made an observation near the end of her Vogue tribute that covers the whole arc more economically than most of the books written about Diana since. Watching Diana navigate the gap between the institution and herself, Harvey wrote that Diana's increasingly independent choices were almost a semaphore of clothes to signal her state of mind, as she well knew. The crucial phrase is at the end, as she well knew. Not as she accidentally stumbled into, not as the press later interpreted, as she well knew. Harvey spent 17 years watching the process from very close range, and the judgment she arrived at was that Diana understood precisely what she was doing with the signals she sent. The jewelry tracked that understanding with a precision the clothing can't quite match, because jewelry is smaller, more enduring, more legible from a distance, and harder to dismiss as coincidence. The Queen Mother gave Diana a sapphire brooch in 1981 to mark her entry into the family. Diana converted it, at her own expense, into a piece that sat at her throat in every photograph from her most significant public appearances for 15 years. The Queen's collection put the lover's knot tiara on Diana's head for a decade of state occasions. When the divorce came, the tiara went back to the collection, and Catherine now wears it. The institution's loans returned to the institution when their purpose was served, doing exactly what the system designed them to do. But the 7-strand choker, converted from the Queen Mother's gift by Diana's own choice and funded from her own account, passed to her sons and sits in their keeping. The engagement ring she chose from a public catalog is on the hand of a Princess of Wales who has built 4 additional rings around it. The aquamarine is in photographs from a 2018 wedding reception. The Swan Lake necklace, the last piece Diana ever commissioned, worn once, never retrieved, went to auction as an unfinished set. The institution gave Diana jewels to make her look royal. Diana learned to wear them in a way that made the palace look small. Its pieces went back to the collection when the arrangements expired. Her pieces kept going, forward in time, forward in the public record, forward onto new hands in new decades, still generating news stories that no press secretary arranged and no institution controls. Every time one of them surfaces, her story reasserts itself in the language she had refined across 15 years of public life, the language of objects that outlasts the people who wore them and keeps saying things long after the wearer is gone. Subscribe for more stories like this.